For better or for worse, superheroes are often seen as beacons of morality. If you are in a situation, a predicament, whatever it may be, you can look at a superhero and ask the question, what would they do if they were in my predicament? Obviously, you would see it as if they have a better moral high ground or even just a better perspective than you do, right? We always trust our heroes to make the right choices, but what if we actually place their morality under question? What if everything they do is subject to scrutiny and they're just as human as the rest of us? Or maybe they realize to make an omelet, you have to break a couple of eggs, and it leads to them making some morally dubious decisions or just straight up locking in and doing things they normally wouldn't. I am kind of dancing around the subject here because I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, I didn't know what to title this video, but the overall theme, I have the entire SpongeBob meme playing in my head with the rainbow. But character transformations is the name of the game. When a character is one way and then they go on a complete 180 pivot of what they were previously. It could be for good or it can be for bad, but either way, it leads to very great and enthralling storytelling decisions that a lot of us just love to read. But before we get started, make sure to leave your favorite character transformations in the comments down below, because I had a very difficult time coming up with 4 because my kind of parameters was that it couldn't be because of some sort of outside external source. I already made a video on dark transformations that came from external factors, so no symbiotes that influence your brain, Raven's Trigon transformation, the Zernar personality from Batman, like any of the quote-unquote evil Hulk transformations. Those things are kind of out of their control. I'm talking about steady progression and character development that changes the way that a character thinks. Also, I'm not going to cover them in this video because I haven't completely finished the series, but I have seen Thorfinn from Vinland Saga is a very good representation of this, especially the transition from Season 1 to Season 2. But without further ado, let's get straight to my list, with the first character being my GOAT. I just vibrated from that pause. Cyclops Scott Summers. And now, to kind of set up the stage, all of this really started in the beginning, or at the end, mind you, sorry, of Avengers vs. X-Men, when the Phoenix Force came down and possessed a bunch of heroes. Now, if you are being possessed by a cosmic firebird, what would you do? I'm gonna give you 3 options. Would you decide to get a raise at your job? Would you try to, I don't know, try to build that dream business, maybe even have a different house or entire island all into yourself? Or will you... I just gave you the most mundane choices of all time. Or would you kill your father figure? Well, if you decided that you were going to end up killing Xavier, then you might have the story narrative of one Scott Summers. Congratulations, because your life is going to take a massive downward spiral. Anyways, after of course losing the corruptive influence of the Phoenix Force, Scott was eventually arrested and dumped into a privatized mutant prison, slapped with power dampeners, right? And of course those iconic ruby quartz helmets that prevent him from shooting his eye beams. The guards weren't trained to help mutants at all, they were trained to shoot on sight. The institution existed to prove mutants could be controlled and profited off. No one cries over a dead mutant, right? You know, muties. But, let me stop. The system here was okayed by the UN. That is what they were comfortable with. This is how they see mutants. And when Logan eventually visited him, because of course they had a lot of butting head moments in previous storylines like Schism, Messiah Complex, and the lot. But either way, when Logan comes here to this prison, Scott didn't even try to defend himself. He didn't even argue. He actually tried to provoke Logan into killing him, because at this point Cyclops wanted to die. He saw himself as a failure. He killed Charles, he failed the world, he failed mutant kind, and on top of all of that, he led to the deaths of many mutants, and he feels like, well, maybe if my life kind of sucks right now, what if I can give it some more purpose by dying as a martyr? But of course, Logan would not allow that. But then Cyclops met Jake, and he was a brand new mutant who manifested his powers mid-fight while being in prison for a robbery of all things, right? Is that common? I don't know. And Scott protected him, talked to him about second chances, about the Jean Grey school, and then watch Jake, after all of that, get stabbed to death by anti-mutant inmates while a guard stood there doing nothing. So that guy right there died because Scott was too passive to act, and because he was passive to interrupt a system that didn't really care about mutant injustice. This moment right here can be marked as the birth of the Revolutionary. Up until then, Magneto offered Scott multiple times to break him out. Scott kept saying no, but watching another mutant die in front of him for nothing was the final straw. It was that wake-up call that he needed, and it led to a new Cyclops. The Cyclops with the crimson suit with the X-shaped visor, the one that we all loved. And it led to him actually having this interesting protest here with Magneto and Magic at his side for liberation and offering mutants sanctuary. This was where the Cyclops' right movement started, the one that's very popular on fan pages and just in general on the internet, that a lot of people are excited about for possibly happening in Season 2 of X-Men 97, if that even ever happens. But the interesting thing here to note is that Cyclops didn't even know what a revolution was at its core, at least what that entailed, because he was shaken, he was grieving, he was guilt-ridden, seeing mutant numbers dwindle every year, seeing Wanda say no more mutants and kill most, 90% if not more, of the mutant population. He was effectively desperate, and he felt like a war needed to be started, a declaration for themselves, right? He realized that no one is coming to save us. He even says, we have to fight for ourselves. To pull out an excerpt here, it says, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, aka the self-appointed face of the mutant revolution. People on the streets love him. Summers is rescuing mutants all over the world. He has dedicated his life to it, and he seems to be everywhere. He is gleefully defying authority at every turn. He is the voice of hope and strength to a large number of people who don't think they have any. He is talking revolution and freedom at any cost, and people are listening. Scott before was a Boy Scout, not exactly the most, clean Boy Scout there was. He had a lot of trauma, turmoil, but this would never cross his mind. He would never feel confident enough to take the dream in this way, but he has. He became the direct split of what the dream always needed. Half the thoughts of Xavier and the other half Magneto. He is the perfect balance because he knows to be extreme when he needs to be. He knows when to be passive when it suits his goals. That is what a great leader does. But then he came across somebody known as Matthew Malloy. Xavier's will revealed, right, that he had secretly lobotomized the most powerful mutant ever detected, an Omega-level reality warper, and he did not understand his powers. And while I feel that that might have been the best call to make because you do not want a reality warper to be out of control, Cyclops had another thought. He's like the same man who preached peace had violated everything he said he believed in, and that scattered his entire belief system that he predicated on Charles Xavier. It was quite a gut punch to say the least, but it was very necessary in my opinion, and it does lead to Scott doing something better. He does have a turn heel while still preaching his ideology. He tried something different and a lot more hopeful, and something that I believe to be very reminiscent of like the 1963 March, right? He gathered mutants, heroes, villains, everyone into a peaceful display in Washington. For one moment, mutant kind stood united. It was the clearest his ideology has ever been, right? Through visibility was revolution made, not violence. It was his greatest moment, but also his last, and can we appreciate the fact that somehow he managed to get Sabretooth to be very peaceful. This man is one of the biggest menaces of all time. I wouldn't even think it was possible in any of the bones in his body to stay still and not kill somebody, but that tells you there, even if it might sway your message on what he's trying to do, that mutants can be peaceful if humans didn't try to eradicate them at every step of the way and try to manipulate them. If they let them be normally, maybe a lot of these characters wouldn't have went to the dark side. Maybe a lot of them can be redeemed. Sabretooth might be way too far gone, but this situation really showed me how unifying and how clear a message could be when everyone takes part. Unfortunately, Cyclops does end up dying in Secret Wars, and his legacy is then twisted by extremist groups called the Ghost of Cyclops. Ooh! but the anti-human or inhuman propaganda and mutant riots that were made in that situation, none of that should be what he is remembered for. He should be known as somebody who stared at a broken system and realized you can't politely ask for change anymore. You have to grip it with your own hands. Whether you love him or hate him in this situation, one thing is still true. Cyclops is right. I'm telling you guys, if they adapted this into a movie or television show, it would make $1 billion, quadrillion, quadrillion more $1 billion. And honestly, by the Nate propaganda, it shall be so. Cyclops, you are my goat. Cyclops, you did a great job teaching Batman. But instead of the master, what if we talked about the students? Oh, that meme has gone on too far. Deku and his Vigilante arc, an arc that a lot of people wish went on for a bit longer, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. It was a full-on psychological collapse of a kid who spent his whole life wanting to save people, finally becoming convinced that the only way he could do that is to suffer alone until he finally breaks. And that is the craziest part. Deku doesn't turn edgy because he likes it. He turns edgy because the alternative in his mind is people dying. That's why it works so well. It's because to his core, it wasn't that much of a shift. Of course, it was in terms of aesthetics and, taking the beaten path by yourself, but all of the pieces were already there. Before One and For All, though, Deku, we have to look back at what he was. He was timid, apologetic, overly polite, always acting like his existence was inconvenient for everybody around him. And that is what happens when you're quirkless in a world where everyone has a quirk and you are defined your worth by that ability that you have. And that made him internalize something dangerous, that his life mattered less than everybody else's. But that self-destructive hero instinct, it didn't come from his abilities though. It came from being bullied into believing saving people was the only way he had value. That's why Deku throws himself into danger without any real hesitation. That's why he breaks his arms knowing that they might never heal. Why he screams for, somebody like Todoroki to use his fire, even though it might cost more permanent damage to his body. Even though it is innate to be positive and kind, that extra pushback against him from society pushed him even further to be like this. But there was always a monster behind that determination, not in terms of being a bad guy, but in terms of being on site and getting things done. In the Liberation War, the paranormal one, as if there's a different one, he sees cities being destroyed, heroes killed, civilians displaced, and Shigaraki, he is very close to being the equal of All For One. Something snaps inside his head, but it's very purposeful, right? He stops seeing himself as a student. He starts seeing himself as a bomb waiting to go off because his presence could possibly lead to the deaths of everybody around him. Not in terms of him not being in control of his powers, but because the villains, all of them, are targeting Deku. They want him, and anybody who's next to him will be in harm's way, right? He's the only target, so might as well make myself a target and be on the move. He abandons Yue. He stops sleeping, he stops eating, he stops even taking a bath. This buddy is musty. And ditches All Might of all people. He ignores his friends and he hunts villains. He is a more proactive protagonist. He is not waiting for them, he's meeting them on his own terms. He's kind of like a sleep-deprived attack dog. Nobody could see him, but when they do, they can't even believe that he is a hero. All of his quirks make people believe that he is a Nomu, adding to his fear factor. Batman would be supremely proud. That's what I always love about Deku. He might actually be top 10 hero material because if Batman or Superman met this boy, they would be so proud, but in different ways. It's great. However, before we transition to the next character, I want to talk about the slander onto Deku's name because people are like, Vigilante Deku finally had that dog in him. But he always had that dog, man. He was a pet owner to begin with. He was the kid who always jumped first, thinks later, and risks everything if it means to save one life. The Vigilante era isn't a tougher Deku, it's Deku losing parts of himself that kept him human. He's so paranoid that he refuses to let anyone touch him. He doesn't want to hurt anybody, and that is what it leads him to be. He fights like a rabid animal instead of a hero. He was destroying his body worse than he ever had before because if he was going to carry out a one-man war against the villains, he had to be motivated by something. Eventually, Class 1A drags him back home, and it's very emotional and, physically challenging for everybody involved, and honestly, one of the most underrated moments in My Hero in general. But it then leads to something that I believe to be very crazy at the end of the story. He doesn't end up mellowing out, he ends up being a focused version of that vigilante mode. His fight with Shigaraki in the final battle was the dog fully unleashed, but with his heart fully intact, right? This version of him isn't a reckless, desperative act. He is controlled, his savagery, plus, mind you, everyone give Deku his flowers for his insane battle IQ. Can we talk about how he was reading Shigaraki's movements like a book, like a literal chess match, right? He uses every quirk that One For All gave him as if it was an extension of his nervous system, improvising strategies mid-air, while exhausted, while bleeding, while barely being even able to move. He had everything figured out. This was the peak of Deku because it took everything from the previous arcs and blended it together to create one symbol. A symbol of hope, of peace, and honestly, a hero who believes every life, including his enemies, is worth saving. That is Deku's craziest transformation. Not just Vigilante Deku, but what he becomes in the final war. Matt Murdock, the most destructive man in all of Marvel, and that is why we love him, but his transformation into the new Kingpin of Hell's Kitchen isn't just a downward spiral, it's the moment that the most principled hero in Marvel, at least from a no-kill standpoint perspective, finally snaps under the weight of his own life. And granted, Spider-Man might have that title, but for the sake of this video, let's keep going. It makes perfect sense too, because he becomes everything he hates, literally the kingpin of crime. And all of this is spurred by him actually getting exposed to be Daredevil. There wasn't really any proof there though, just enough noise to, hurt his life a bit. His clients kind of walk away, his cases fall apart, his reputation gets a little bit muddy, and Matt, the lawyer who believes in the courtroom and it being sacred and suddenly forced to weaponize law to defend a truth that he can't legally admit, right? He becomes a hypocrite in real time, suing people for telling the truth, lying to his friends, losing control of the mask that defines his entire life. But then to make matters worse, Fisk himself strikes. He comes from Europe, and Wilson decides this is his new goal for New York, to take everything back. He frames Daredevil for murder, he sends Typhoid Mary and Bullseye after him again to destroy his life. He drags a bunch of his friends into the crossfire, Foggy, Ben Urich, even Mila Donovan, his true love actually, the person that he ends up marrying, and she suffers because Matt is stubborn, and he ends up throughout this run at different periods emotionally manipulating them without meaning to, pushing them away while relying them to clean up a lot of the mess. And eventually, for Matt, it becomes one waking nightmare way too many, so when Fisk comes waddling in to reconsolidate his power, Matt becomes a true force of nature, and their fight in Daredevil 50 is one of my favorite Daredevil issues of all time. It's just so raw. Two men fighting each other and having their histories paint the page itself. Literally, as they punch each other, the art style changes, and it just reminds us of all the previous arcs between these two that makes the rivalry so rich in content and why we love it so much. Just pure, unfiltered brutality. And it leads to a really great scene that I'm just going to read as he throws Kingpin into a bar. And he says, "This is Kingpin, your Kingpin. This is Wilson Fisk, and I beat him with my bare hands. This man is going to rot in jail for the rest of his life, for the hell that he has made this city. And if I could do this to him, imagine what I could do to you, to all of you, if for the second forward you sell your drugs, rob, or whore anywhere near my city. Find somewhere else, far, far from here. I am here to say, if you people so badly want some sort of Kingpin, someone to lord over you, well, from now on, it's me. I am not protecting the city anymore, I am running it. I say, the people of Hell's Kitchen are my people. This is my territory now, and I say, get out or change tonight." And this right here, I don't know if anybody else was reminded of this, but I just flashbacked to the Jensen Ackles speech in Under the Red Hood when Jason takes over the criminal racket. And I know to my Daredevil fans, it is sacrilege to compare Jason Todd at all to the Ghost Murdock himself, but can we all just admit, just for a little bit, I know I hate Jason a lot, maybe a bit too much, but that movie and that version of Jason is a very complex and great character. I'm nerd, I know. But the craziest part here is that they listen, right? He's like, you think you know me, you think you know who I am, these are new rules, this is how it'll be from now on, spread the word. And if you think I'm kidding, look at this carcass right in front of you. And for 6 weeks straight, he goes on a campaign to make Hell's Kitchen the safest neighborhood in America. Crime plummets, gangs flee, dealers quit, and he enforces change through fear, intimidation, and force. He's becoming Wilson Fisk right before our very eyes, but just aimed at the opposite direction, and he starts to like it a bit. He ends up taking a leave off of the Daredevil identity and settling down with Mila for a bit, and getting married in secret, rebuilding Hell's Kitchen with the money that he got from the lawsuit against the Globe for trying to out his secret identity. He becomes a community figure, and for 1 year, Matt's life is the closest that he ever had to peace. And the craziest irony here is that Matt can fix Hell's Kitchen, yes, but it just pushes crime somewhere else. Queens gets worse, Brooklyn gets worse, New Jersey gets worse, everywhere ends up being an issue. The Avengers confront him, Spider-Man confronts him, Luke Cage warns him about what's coming. Eventually all of them do come together in consolidating their power to work together, but the old Matt, the one who listened and compromised, the one who believed in teamwork, was a bit more gruffled, if that's even a word. Am I making up words? The English language is so malleable, I know, but getting back on topic, when the Yakuza decide that Hell's Kitchen is vulnerable, they nearly kill Matt on the street, which leads to the old Daredevil resurfacing. And Matt finally admits that he is messing up. His manipulation has gone too far. What he's done to his allies, to the people in general, yes, it might have just been words, but words can carry a lot of power. But the consequences don't disappear just because you realize you're wrong. Even if those consequences come from the worst, possibly the most unethical, illegal man there is, the Kingpin himself, right? While his identity case collapses and the government closes in, the criminal underworld wants revenge. Daredevil gets sent to prison by the Kingpin, who gives the FBI something called the Murdock Papers, undeniable proof that Matt Murdock is Daredevil and all of the crimes that he has committed before and during his act as the new Kingpin of New York. The fall is total here, and the craziest part is that Matt Murdock did it all to himself. And while I don't fully agree with all of his actions, I will have to admit, I was jumping for joy off the walls, off my seat. My seat literally has cracks in it. I'm not that thick, I'm actually skinny, but my seat is still ripped from the impact of these comics. My seat had to suffer from impact frames, bro. This thing, I gotta pay for this, but I loved it. I love seeing Matt literally lose his mind and say enough is enough. It makes him feel a lot more human and adds to his rap sheet of being one of, if not the most self-destructive man in all of comics, at least from the hero standpoint. This man is on a mission to be the trophy holder of self-loathing, of hating yourself more than any of your enemies could. But it makes for very entertaining storytelling, and Matt, hats off for you for ruining your mental health for all of our entertainment. God bless. I spoke about him before, I've spoken about him many times, and he has returned. It's Hal Highball Jordan, the best Green Lantern there is, and his fall into becoming Parallax, but it won't be a Redux version because I'm going to go more in depth in his Parallax arc, because as we all know, or most of us know, Parallax Hal Jordan was a mindset shift. It was retconned into being a giant alien tendril fear bug that was, the emotional representation or the physical manifestation of what fear is, and that was trapped in the yellow power battery, and why the Green Lanterns had the weakness to yellow, or that yellow impurity. It's because that giant fear bug was in their power source, and while all of that makes sense and is really cool as a retcon, it does do damage to those original Parallax Hal Jordan stories. He didn't seem like he was being controlled by something else, but I will give Jeff Johns the benefit of the doubt, because not only did he completely expand on the Green Lantern mythos in the best way anyone possibly could. If you read it in a different angle, you could see it as him being influenced by something, but he was still fully in control, and there were moments when Parallax would take full control, but Hal's willpower was so strong that he was able to stay in control for most of that life cycle. He might have gone only a little bit insane at certain points. That is how I'm going to read it. That is my best way to reconcile and recontextualize everything so that it makes sense. But here, the reason why all of this occurred was because of the death of Coast City. 10 million people, his friends, his neighbors, his entire childhood was wiped off the map by Mongol and the cyborg Superman. He was too late to do anything, and his ring could only do so much. He tried to build Coast City again out of pure willpower. Every building, car, street, person, they weren't even illusions. They were memories that he was afraid to let go. They were speaking to him as if they were there. But eventually, the Guardians, being, the jackass that they are, decided to call a foul on what he was doing and saying that he needed to be reprimanded for using his ring in that way. Because the Guardians, those little blue leprechaun imps, don't care about emotions, because on the emotional spectrum, willpower is the baseline, right? You can't have willpower and experience anything else, but the goal is to keep yourself centered. Kind of like the Jedis in Star Wars, if you guys know basic ball knowledge. But the fall here is when Hal fought against the Green Lantern Corps, because he was trying to gain as much power as he can to reverse everything that happened, and he ends up killing all of them, not out of hatred, but because they're in his way. And he feels like by the end of this, he would have the ability to rewrite reality. That is his goal. This is temporary. None of their deaths will be in vain, because it will lead to them eventually coming back. And he reaches into the central power battery after killing all the Guardians except Ganthet. After killing everyone with the power ring, he absorbs the entire thing and he becomes Parallax himself. He's a hero trying to build a perfect universe. He learns how to alter time. He tries to fix the timeline because he believes it's flawed, like the tragedies in his life and others are bugs that needs to be correcting. As if he was a comp-sci major, he does explain the depression. He tries to reconstruct entire worlds, manipulate reality, and in 0 Hour, that entire fiasco there, that was his final attempt, his chance to make everything right. He's trying to heal through fixing the unfixable, trying to bring the dead back to life in the only way he knows how, through willpower and through that control that slipped out of his hands that he now grasps once again for being as powerful as he is. But in the end, he was defeated and he was sent packing. After being the enemy of the entire DC universe and being the final boss, he was sent to the emotional gulag, so to speak. His Darth Vader arc didn't end with him dying though. As a true Anakin follower, he ended up getting his redemption through sacrifice. In Final Night, we see Hal Jordan choose to save the universe at the cost of his own life, a complete switch onto what he was already doing. In the series, the sun goes out. The Sun Eater, as you might expect, literally consumes the sun. It's a black dot in space. Nothing is warming the Earth, but the start of Parallax's part in the story is when he was fighting Cyborg Superman and getting personal revenge, and he tears Hank apart through constructs of everybody ever killed in Coast City. Talk about some sweet revenge. But before he does anything crazy, we see a pilgrimage of goodbyes in a very heartfelt moments or set of moments back to back to back. He goes on a quick journey, a tour through the people who shaped him, grounded him, and loved him. It's the most human Hal has been in a while. The first person he meets is Guy Gardner. They fought constantly, right? They clashed ideologies, but Hal always trusted Guy to guard his back. He's somebody that you always want in your corner. Someone who will always get the things that need to be done in straight and efficient manner. Now he leaves him as a friend, not as an enemy. Then he meets with John Stewart, his direct replacement, and he is bedridden, broken, and paralyzed at this point in time. He kneels beside him, has a full-on conversation, and then through an act of compassion, heals his legs and gives him the ability to walk again. He visits Oliver Queen in his grave, Green Arrow, and it's one of the more sad moments because he is a fallen hero trying to seek forgiveness from another fallen hero, somebody who can't even speak back. He visits Tom, his best friend in his civilian life. It's very quiet, very simple, and very painfully normal. And finally, Carol Ferris, the love of his life. She immediately sees him, the tension, the finality, and the weight of his voice. Hal is preparing for something irreversible, and she knows it, but eventually both of them disappear from each other's sight, and it leads to one of my favorite moments of all time. I know that's what they think, right? What they fear at least. Batman, even Superman, on some level, everyone in between. But I took an oath a long time ago, and that oath taught me something none of them will ever understand. There are two ways to dispel the darkness. In brightest day, to shine a light, in darkest night, or to draw the darkness in. Razor-edged blackness tears its way up my arm. I knew it'd be hell absorbing the Sun Eater, but it's all I can do to keep it from absorbing me. There's no going back, there never was. Not since the first day I said those words. No evil shall escape my sight. I've always done what I truly believed was right. At first, people called me a hero for it and then a villain. As the memory of what I've done and been fades, I hope I will be seen. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power in a different light. That is what I call a last stand. He dies not as a fallen lantern, but as a hero. The Earth is saved and then the sun is finally ignited. But what do you guys think? Who are your favorite character transformations of all time throughout fiction? Let me know in the comments down below. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, that's all there is from me. See you all later. Take care. Deuces. Peace.